if you have a family of 4, okay, and you need to feed your family, are you gonna go, well, I can't afford a car, so I guess we'll just try to find a job. It's only 3% of employment around here, but we'll do the best. Or are you going to figure out how to buy a jalopy, right? I hate saying it like that, but buy a car and limp it to the best of your abilities so that you can have 58% increase, right, in a job opportunity so you can work. You're going to buy the car. So having a vehicle, it's not a, oh, you bought a car just because you want to. You have to. You have to buy the car, or else you're not feeding your family, right? And then the other issues we have is you walk in somewhere and you need, here in the state of Virginia, you need an inspection.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. Today we're going to be talking about cars. And engineer Matt is very excited, I'm sure, because he's going to love this. Because as you can see behind him, not only does he like working on cars, but he loves talking about them on his podcast. So, Matt, when and how did you first get interested in cars?
Oh, man. I mean, here's the thing. If you get me talking cars, you won't have me shut up. Like, it's not going to happen. We're never going to get to the guest. So, but I started, I didn't grow up in a family working on cars, but it was probably right around when I was 16, I got my first car, and, I wrecked my first car, and then my mother said, okay, you're buying the next one that you get. So I bought a $800 Jeep. And I had to learn how to work on this thing to do anything with it. I couldn't afford to pay someone to work on it. Every little thing to keep that on the road, I had to do myself. So I really learned it out of a necessity. And then I sort of developed a love for it. The troubleshooting mindset that you build when you're working on cars is something that's really useful in all avenues of life, even if it's not just, wrenching on your car, your daily driver, a beater car, whatever.
That's fabulous. I always wish I knew a little more about cars. I've picked up enough, to be able to save myself a little money here and there and to know when someone's trying to scam me. But I love folks who have a deep knowledge of cars. There's such a community out there that loves them. I mean, I guess you wouldn't have your own podcast if they didn't. So I'm excited to talk to our guest coming up and the work that he does. Really a ministry that he has talking, involving cars. So it's going to be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to it. A lot of us don't think twice about our cars. We grab the keys, hop in, run to the grocery store, get to a doctor's appointment, and make it work. It's just, part of everyday life for most of us. But for some folks, when that car breaks down, it's not just an inconvenience. It's a crisis. If they can't afford the repair bill, they might miss work. And when the job goes, everything else can start to wobble. Our guest today saw that this was happening in his own community. So he stepped up and started a nonprofit that helps people who find themselves in this situation. And he's not just fixing cars. He's giving people second chances by employing folks who need one. I want to welcome to the podcast Jason Wells, who is the founder and executive director of Mechanics for Faith in, unironically, Mechanicsville, Virginia. Jason, welcome and thanks for joining us.
So we are on the outskirts of Mechanicsville. Actually, we are located in King William County, just right outside of Mechanicsville, Virginia. Biggest capital would be Richmond, Virginia, for those that may not be familiar with Virginia. And we founded Mechanics of Faith a little over 8 years ago. And much to what you just said, I felt the calling to help those with automotive repairs because it's just such a need. A lot of folks that are probably listening to your podcast right now are listening to it in their car and don't think twice about, driving to work, driving to a doctor's appointments. For many of the clients that we work with here at Mechanics of Faith, they're one car repair away from homelessness.
Our cars play such a big part in so many of our lives, and it's such an important linchpin for so many people, especially if you're not in an urban area that is mass transit, where for you to get to your livelihood and all that. But before we dive into that, I'd love to hear about what did you do before you started Mechanics of Faith? What did you were working in a different field, weren't you?
Yeah, so you probably think I was either a pastor, right, or a mechanic, but I wasn't. So I actually graduated high school in 2005 and went directly into the architectural and engineering world. And I designed embassies for the government. I've done clean room design. I've done HVAC, electrical design, construction design. So basically, I did that for 20 years. And but I had a passion for cars. I used to chop up motorcycles and build bobbers. I used to, every car I owned, I used to lower it, put rims on it, modify it. And, it was just a huge passion of mine in school. And, it started out just being something where people would bring their cars to me and say, hey, I need, can you help me with this? I can't afford to get this done. And just bring it to me. I'll help you. No problem. Let's get it done. And then all of a sudden I started to feel the calling that there was more purpose to my life than to sit behind a desk and be a designer, that God had other plans for me.
So when that kind of calling started, I imagine it just kind of creeps up on you, or maybe it was more sudden, but how take me at like the beginning of the idea, and then as you started to make it a reality, like how did that progress?
Yeah, so I stayed, in the AEC world for a very long time. While running or founding Mechanics of Faith, I was actually a manager for a manufacturing plant, building a design team all over the world for them and traveling and flying. And so I would have people drop their cars off at my house, and I'd be like, hey, look, when I get back into town, I'll take a look at it. And, it was just fun, right? It was just something exciting and fun. And, it wasn't anything major, we're just helping some folks out. Well, one night, my wife and I are sitting on the sofa watching TV, and all of a sudden there's all these yellow lights coming through the windows. I'm like, what is going on? And there were and I live in a neighborhood. Okay. You reach out and touch your neighbor, and there were 2 tow trucks dropping cars off in my driveway. And my wife was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. And, I had neighbors, right? I was putting cars in my neighbors' driveways, because they all loved what we had done, right? They loved what I was doing, and they understood that I was trying to help people. And that's where it really started to become, okay, this is bigger than Jason fixing cars. This is, and at the same time too, right? Just taking a step back, at the same time, I had recently just accepted Christ again in my heart. I just got baptized, and I was going down the path of, what is it that you want me to do, God? Right? It's not about it's about He, right? What is it that He would have me do? And that's where Mechanics of Faith began to blossom.
So how did so you go from you decide to start this and eventually make it your career, right? And
yes, sir.
How did the word spread, or how did you kind of start to build it up so it became a thing that you could pour yourself into?
Yeah, so it again is in my driveway. I started a board. Had a gentleman who Andrew, him and I kind of were spearheading this whole thing. Young kid. A couple years younger than me. He was, just finding his faith as well. And it was like, we just traveled around. We drove. I mean, I modified my Nissan Versa so I could put a roof rack on it that would hold my tools and my jack stands and everything. And then it became an issue of there was too many people that needed help. We can't drive to every single person. So then we started looking for churches that would allow us to work in their parking lot one Saturday a month. So we did that in a gravel parking lot. And so just imagine, a 14-hour day on a Saturday in 105-degree weather, 110-degree weather, fixing cars, oil changes, brakes, CV axles, suspension work, tune-ups, whatever we could do to keep these folks on the roads. And So then I met a pastor, Pastor Lee Mitchell, who pulled up from a men's breakfast that was at the church we were at and says, dude, I have a paved parking lot and a tool shed. You can have it. I want your ministry. I want your car, what you're doing here, to come to my church. And I said, okay, cool. I go where God takes me. And so again, now keep in mind, I'm still running a massive team, in the corporate space, at the same time. So we're doing all of this. We move over to Henrico County, and we go in, we renovate the tool shed so that we have an office space and we've got storage space, but we're still in a parking lot. And, at this same time, a gentleman who my wife and I were friends with, ended up getting incarcerated. Gentleman by the name of Joe Banks, great guy. And my wife and I, or I should say, started pouring into him via the phone, right? So he starts calling me. At first he was embarrassed, and I said, "Look, man, I still love you, dude. Like, everybody makes mistakes. Like, it's going to be okay." And he is in recovery. He was in the recovery program, and he was there for 3 months. I was ministering him over the phone, and I kept telling my wife, This is it. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be pouring into people and helping people, right? And using my skills and my passion for cars to do it. And so my wife and I just said, all right, Joe, you're going to come work for Mechanics of Faith when you get out of incarceration and you get into a recovery house. And he was like, huh? And I said, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, right? I don't know either. And so my wife and I covered his bed fees. We helped him get his driver's license back, and he began working for Mechanics of Faith. And then one day he showed up with 3 more guys from the recovery house. Now I had 4 individuals in recovery working at Mechanics of Faith. Well, I wouldn't say working. My wife and I were covering bed fees and things like that. And then we slowly started trying to raise money so that we could afford to grow. We left Henrico due to some zoning issues. We ended up in Mechanicsville, and we just began to get larger and larger. And then finally, my company I was working for decided to lay off my entire department or my entire team and outsource it because an expense is better than an overhead. And I told my wife, I said, I'm not going back. I said, I'm done. I'm going full ministry. This is what God has called us to do, our family to do, right? Keep in mind here, it's my family that's been called to do this, not Jason. And at the same time, all this is going on, Pastor Lee from the church that we went to in the tool shed, right? Where we set up in the tool shed, licensed me as a pastor. I went to Liberty for Christian ministry to get my master's, and I just kept going and kept going. And now I'm the lead pastor of Redemption House that actually meets inside the shop on Sunday nights.
Really?
And also the founder of Mechanics of Faith. I actually have a picture, and I have a couple pastor friends that have a picture of me in my ordainment when I got ordained inside of the shop. Like, there are cars on the lift behind me as I'm being ordained, and a couple of my pastor friends are like, dude, I've never heard of this. Like, what a pastor being ordained in a shop. And I'm sure it's happened before. But for them, they were just like, this is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, kind of lifting up voices, lifting up lives, and lifting up cars, I guess. Literally.
Amen.
Yeah, just tell me about the people who come and, who are your clients?
So, our clients are, you have to be on food stamps, so Medicaid, like EBT, some sort of government assistance, or a part of an organization that's helping stand you up, right? That's helping you get back on your feet. They can submit a letter and vouch for you, stating that, hey, look, this individual really needs some help. We've helped them with their electric bill. We've helped them here. We've helped them that, because we understand. My wife's a nurse. And again, my wife being a nurse, and then I was in corporate, my wife and I did very well for ourselves at the time, but that doesn't mean that you don't get hit with a massive medical bill or, hit with a crisis in your life where, your car breaks down, you got to buy a new car. And now all of a sudden your budget's just blown out the water. You don't know what you're going to do. So, there are folks that come in here that some people are like, I can't believe they need help. And I'm like, you don't know their story, right? You don't know what they're going through.
Yep.
So, just because they show up in a Mercedes doesn't mean they have money. They could have had money and they could have fallen down on hard times. And, that's the only car they have now. We've had some folks that have come in here with some very nice cars. And I've heard people make comments and I look them right in the face and I said, you might think that Mercedes is nice, but that's also their house because they were doing well for themselves. They got laid off. They couldn't find other employment and now they're living in their cars. We have individuals that sleep in tents and sleep on the side of the road. I say side of the road, like in the woods, while we're fixing their vehicles.
Yeah.
We have domestic violence victims that we help scan their cars for bugs. We have literally put cars back together for domestic violence victims so they could, I hate saying it, but flee the country due to issues. So we do the best that we can with what we have. And we don't have a lot. I'm not ashamed to say that. I've had to make my own tools. We've had to make do with what we have, because again, everybody sees us as an automotive shop. And unfortunately automotive shops, people think we have money and we don't. And that's the most uphill battle I have is trying to explain to people that you don't understand. We're not financially wealthy like everybody thinks automotive shops are.
So when you go to fix a car, I mean, there's obviously labor, but there's also parts that are expense. I paid them all plenty of times for lots of cars. How do you guys basically as part of your ministry, you guys pay for the parts also? You absorb all the costs or what's your model?
No. So we used to many, many years ago. And then as we grew larger, the need was bigger, right? I mean, brakes, oil changes, things like that. But as we grew larger, the need was so much bigger. We found that, if we were to just offer an affordable rate, understanding that affordable, depending on your situation is a two-edged sword. So we are affordable. So our labor rate is $90 an hour. And also included with that $90 an hour, you reimburse for parts, but we don't have an enormous parts markup. Our parts markup just covers a little bit of the software that we need so that we can order our parts and we can do all these things. And so we are roughly a third the cost of what it would take for a traditional shop to function. So for example, we had somebody come in, they had a $9,000 quote for a motor. We did the exact same job for $3,000. And although $3,000 is still high, those individuals can still, they can work with other charities, other churches and other organizations to get the support. $3,000 is a lot easier to go get multiple organizations to support than $9,000, right?
I love that you're in this space because it had been clear to me. I happened to be like it was either for myself or one of my kids at the courthouse, over a court call for a ticket to challenge it or whatever. And I'm looking around at all the people there. It's a big cattle call. And I'm like, a lot of these people don't have a great command of English. And a lot of them are clearly kind of poor. And I'm just sitting there going, man, this is hard for me to navigate. And that fact that they have to navigate this is difficult. And, if you more often, if you're somebody who has less job options, you have to be there on time. You can't miss. You don't have a lot of vacation days. There's a lot of aspects that go to it that in order to keep your job, which is a linchpin to kind of keeping your life together to some degree, the car sometimes is the essential element. And so often I think government tends, whether it be, we have emissions regulations here and there's other, stipulations you got to pay for, to the government to be able to use your car. It's a way that so many people get involved with the criminal justice system that they, their stickers expired or their plates are expired or they don't have something that's proper. and it puts them in the system, which is so often a way that people kind of really spiral. And I imagine that you're kind of at the intersection of that. I think you're trying to prevent a lot of that, actually. But talk to me about like what you see in that space.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you bring that up, David. Just a couple numbers, and these are not Jason numbers. These are legitimate numbers. So let's take a 30-minute space. I live in the city, okay? I live in the city, and within 30 minutes, so I have access to public transportation, okay? Within 30 minutes, if you're using public transportation, your job opportunities are only 3%. So you only have 3% opportunities for employment within 30 minutes using public transportation. In that same space, okay, that same space, if you have your own vehicle, it's 58% job opportunities.
Good.
That is massive. Okay. So when I see, and I go to court with these guys, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the other things we're doing on the back end that a lot of folks don't realize, right? They assume, that we're just a shop, but 58% compared to 3%. Now think about that for a second. If you have a family of 4, okay, and you need to feed your family, are you going to go, well, I can't afford a car, so I guess we'll just try to find a job. It's only 3% of employment around here, but we'll do the best. Or are you going to figure out how to buy a jalopy, right? I hate saying it like that, but buy a car and limp it to the best of your abilities so that you can have 58% increase, right, in a job opportunity so you can work. You're going to buy the car.
Yeah.
So having a vehicle, it's not a, oh, you bought a car just because you want to. You have to. You have to buy the car, or else you're not feeding your family.
Right.
Right? And then the other issues we have is you walk in somewhere and you need, here in the state of Virginia, you need an inspection, and you fail inspection and you have a $2,500 bill to get your car to pass inspection. How are you going to pass inspection? How are you going to pay for that in 15 days? You have 15 days to pay $2,500 to get your car through inspection. Not happening. So you're going to drive a car that's unsafe. You're going to drive a car that you have to drive to get to work, right? That is probably falling apart and dangerous on the road because you don't have $2,500. $2,500, that's rent. That's that is rent and groceries.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have that to fix my car. Like I said, my wife and I did very well for ourselves when I was in corporate, okay? I'm not boasting about that. I'm using it as an example. My wife and I were considered a 6-figure household income before we made the call to ministry. And I can assure you, if we got hit with a $2,500 repair bill, we wouldn't have been able to afford it with a family of 5.
Yep.
So individuals that are single mothers of 2 or 3 or 4 kids cannot afford a $2,500 car repair. Most of the people, I wouldn't even say most, 90% of the people that come through our doors are one car repair away from homelessness. Because it's either fix my car or pay my rent.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to get the community to understand, and they don't get it. Every single customer that comes through our doors, it costs our organization $60, and we helped 1,200 families last year. We're hoping to help over 2,000 this year, right? But because we're an automotive shop, nobody likes us.
That stuff's not to be it. Well, so you had some conversations that you've been in some roundtable discussions with elected leaders. What's something that they're either surprised to hear from when you talk to them?
So I've had conversations with like other nonprofits, individuals that do have higher stakes in the city. I've had the Secretary of Labor has come out and done a tour. And the same conversation it's always the same conversation. Homelessness and housing is our biggest crisis. And I do this. I sat in a room of 30 nonprofits and a couple other folks that with I would call it with seniority, and they all say the same thing. Homelessness and housing is our biggest problem. And I literally sit there like this. And I'm just looking around. And I chimed in and I said, guys, homelessness and housing is not our biggest problem. It's transportation. It's having access to a vehicle so you can get to work. That's our biggest problem. 40% of my clients that come through our doors, I guarantee you it's 40% or higher, tell me that if I can get my car fixed, then I can afford my bills, right? Or I have another portion of people that come to me and say, Jason, I got a $3,000 grant funding from a nonprofit that was supporting me to help pay my rent, but my car broke down, I lost my job, and now I'm homeless again. Transportation is the biggest problem. But the hardest problem to solve is it's so big.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a JROTC bus. It's not a, Ubers and Lyfts. And again, I'm not bashing any of those because we need them, right? We have folks that come in here that have a vehicle that, they love public transportation. The only issue they have is they have to go out of town, right, for their job. And when I say out of town, I'm talking about like out of the county into another county. Yep. But so I'm not bashing anybody, but we still have a problem. We're not solving anything. We're just putting a Band-Aid on it. And I really want to be a part of the solution, and actually solve things. And so that's really what we're trying to do here at Mechanics of Faith. So we have, excuse me. So, if somebody comes to us, needing repairs, like I said, that's putting them back on the road. That's giving them job opportunities. That's giving them, I hate saying it, shelter. Now they can sleep in their cars.
We'll have to wrap up soon, but I want to hear about some of the stories of the folks that you've hired that work with you.
Yep, that's what I wanted to make sure we got to. So big things are happening here at Mechanics of Faith. So we do hire recovery folks. Like I had told you, Joe, who my wife and I paid his bed fees when he came here. He was a recovery individual, started getting them coming in. And really, he was the one that guided me and kind of pushed me into ministry as a pastor and to start the church, Redemption House of Prayer, for those seeking a religious journey. And so from that, right, we hire a lot of individuals who are in recovery. I have 2 that currently work for me, and we are launching in the next 30 days an apprenticeship program where they're going to, individuals who are second chance, right? So recently out of jail and recovery can come and work at Mechanics of Faith. They can get their ASE accreditations and basically be a licensed technician to go on to make $60,000 to $100,000 a year, I hope. And that really depends on, where they get their job placement and things like that. And so we're not just fixing cars. We're also helping individuals, men and women, get their feet back under them, right? And so that's why I try to tell folks, like, it's not just a shop. It's so much more than a shop. And it's also not a shop that, although it says Mechanics of Faith, many people will tell you they come here and had no clue I was a pastor, right? Because we don't push religion. Just like, folks always say, well, like I had one guy that worked for me and he's like, well, why didn't you invite me to church? And I'm like, well, because I want you to have a relationship with God. I don't want you to come to church because your boss invited you and you think that if you come to church, you're going to get ahead at Mechanics of Faith, or if you don't come to church, you're going to get terminated or something like that. We don't do that, right? We want to be the light. We want to be the light. We want people to see Christ through our actions, to see Christ through what we do every day. That's all we want to do. And we've had we've had 7 recovery guys come through Mechanics of Faith, one of which has a great job with the HVAC company. Another one works at a junkyard pulling parts and loves it. It's doing well with life, doing amazing. Another one didn't even know how to take a tire off his car when he came here. Now he's working at an automotive shop, just doing great things. So that's the other part that we do here that a lot of people don't see.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love to hear the stories. So, Jason, so if someone is listening and wants to learn more about you and all that's going on with Mechanics of Faith, where can they go?
So, check out our website, mechanicsoffaith.org or .com, either one. So mechanicsoffaith.org. Our Facebook page is also linked on our website. We post videos, we do testimonies, just go out there and read about us, man. We're on YouTube. We have stories on YouTube. Any support that anybody's willing to give, it takes about almost $30,000 a month to keep this place open.
Wow. Well, God bless you for the work you're doing, man. Your story just personally is so inspiring and cool, and I'm glad that we could tell that. But like the stories of the guys that are working for you and the people that you're ministering to it's definitely the Lord's work. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us. So, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.